Andrew Lawson had built a tech empire, but now he lived in darkness, blinded by a mysterious collapse no doctor could explain. One afternoon in Golden Gate Park, an 11-year-old homeless boy approached him with a chilling truth: "Your wife did this to you." In that moment, Andrew realized his greatest threat wasn't his blindness, it was the person sleeping in the room next to him. Andrew Lawson had once been the kind of man who dominated every room he walked into. A figure shaped by two decades at the top of America's tech world. He was the founder of Lawson Dynamics, a company that started in a cramped Palo Alto co-working loft and grew into a multi-billion-dollar engine powering everything from smart cities to aerospace analytics. Investors spoke his name with reverence, competitors feared the precision of his intuition. Journalists wrote profiles marveling at the way he predicted technological waves before they broke. People said Andrew could see the future. Then one day he woke up and discovered he could no longer see anything at all. The doctors called it a progressive neuro-optical collapse, a phrase that sounded sophisticated but offered no clarity. None could explain why the degeneration had happened so quickly. Why his once sharp vision dissolved into dim smudges and then complete darkness within months. Specialists at top hospitals from Stanford to Boston tested him, scanned him, ran every neurological assessment. But all they ever found were anomalies without explanations. Andrew, a man who had solved some of the most complex engineering puzzles on the planet, could not solve the mystery inside his own head. He tried to accept the reality, but acceptance came slowly. He had led a life built on precision and control. Now he was a man navigating hallways by counting footsteps and relying on the texture of carpets. The world adjusted to his blindness faster than he did. At home, changes appeared quietly, furniture rearranged for safety, medications organized into unmarked bottles he had to trust, appointments scheduled for him without his input. Everyone kept telling him they wanted to help, yet that help somehow made him feel smaller. Even the estate he lived in, perched above San Francisco Bay with glass walls overlooking the water, felt like it belonged to a stranger now. What good was a view when he could not see the horizon? What good was a mansion when he could not walk across his own living room without a cane? Through all of this, his wife Victoria Lawson became the primary architect of his new life. To outsiders, she appeared devoted, guiding Andrew by the arm during public events, speaking on his behalf at board meetings, assuring shareholders he was still mentally sharp though medically compromised. She handled logistics, legal matters, public relations, even personal affairs. Andrew often thanked her, believing she was the anchor holding their world together. But beneath the polished veneer of concern, something in her tone had shifted. The warmth she once carried in her voice had thinned, replaced by a careful coolness that felt rehearsed. Whenever she guided him by the elbow, he sensed more control than affection. The worst part, perhaps, was how much he depended on her. Andrew had never depended on anyone, not for business decisions, not for emotional support, not even for navigating crises. He built an empire through autonomy. Now, the man who once walked the floors of factories inspecting hardware prototypes could not take a step down the driveway without Victoria telling him which direction to turn. She brought him to Golden Gate Park every afternoon, insisting the fresh air would lift his spirit. Andrew went along with it because he didn't have the energy to resist. He felt worn out, drained by a fog he couldn't describe, almost as if something beyond blindness was pulling him inward, dulling thoughts that were once razor-sharp. Some days he wondered if blindness had changed him more than he realized. Conversations felt harder to follow. Time passed strangely. He struggled to remember certain details of meetings or interactions. He chalked it up to stress, aging, overexertion. Victoria assured him everything was fine, that he simply needed rest, that she would take care of things. But deep down, Andrew felt as though pieces of the man he used to be were slipping away. He just couldn't identify why. His company, meanwhile, continued without him. Victoria became his representative despite having never held an executive position. Board members claimed they wanted to respect his legacy, but their actions felt like preparation for something beyond that: transition, succession, perhaps even removal. Andrew sensed shifts in the air whenever he attended virtual meetings. Conversations paused when he joined, voices lowered when he asked questions, and financial decisions were presented to him as if they were already made. Andrew Lawson, once the sharpest strategist in Silicon Valley, found himself nodding to conclusions he couldn't fully follow. One afternoon, as he sat on a bench in Golden Gate Park feeling the breeze move across the trees, he found himself thinking about the man he used to be. He remembered walking through his laboratories watching engineers craft machine learning processors. He remembered late nights sketching blueprints on napkins in diners. He remembered the thrill of seeing a world-changing idea come to life. None of that existed for him now. In its place was a strange, constricting sense of being controlled, directed, placed where others wanted him. He didn't like the feeling, yet he didn't know how to break out of it. He didn't know when the shift truly began. Maybe it was months before he lost his eyesight. Maybe it began at the first corporate gala where he suffered migraines so intense he nearly fainted. Victoria told him it was exhaustion and insisted on handling the aftermath. Or maybe it was the day he was given a new medication he couldn't identify, a prescription Victoria claimed came from a specialist. It helped for a while until it didn't. The world blurred, his thoughts slowed, and the decline accelerated. Every memory that came to him now felt like a breadcrumb leading to a trail he had ignored. Despite everything, Andrew never voiced his suspicions. He barely admitted them to himself. Because to question Victoria would require confronting the possibility that the person closest to him, the person he trusted with his life, might not be acting out of love. And for a man already living in darkness, the idea of losing emotional certainty as well felt like stepping into a deeper void. So he pushed the doubts aside, choosing comfort over confrontation. He told himself Victoria cared, that she was overwhelmed, that stress changed people, that marriage evolved. He told himself anything that allowed him to keep believing his life was still intact. But the truth had already begun to unravel, even if he didn't yet know it. The shift in his world, the pressure closing around his life, the strange haze in his mind, none of it was random. It was the beginning of something calculated. And in the days ahead, Andrew Lawson would discover that the darkness he lived in was not just a medical condition, but a trap carefully constructed around him, piece by piece, by someone he trusted more than anyone. The first time Caleb Carter approached Andrew Lawson, the moment felt so unexpected that Andrew wondered whether his mind was playing tricks on him. He was seated on his usual bench in Golden Gate Park, listening to the ambient hum of joggers, cyclists, and children playing nearby. Victoria had left him there while she attended yet another business call, claiming it would take only a few minutes. Andrew had grown accustomed to these increasingly frequent absences. She always stepped away, always returned with the same syrupy expression, always insisted she was doing everything for his well-being. That afternoon, however, something different broke through the monotony, footsteps that didn't sound rehearsed. Hesitant breaths that stopped just a few feet away from him. Before Andrew could guess who stood there, a young voice asked, "Are you really Andrew Lawson?" Andrew turned his head instinctively toward the voice. He felt no fear, only curiosity. Children occasionally recognized him, especially when his company had once sponsored STEM programs across California. Though most kids didn't approach a man they thought was blind. "Yes," Andrew answered, adjusting his posture. "Who's asking?" The boy didn't introduce himself right away. Instead, he said, "People keep talking about you. They say you used to run one of the biggest tech companies in America. They say something happened to you." His tone wasn't mocking. It carried the kind of raw honesty only a child could manage. After a pause, the boy added, "I'm Caleb." Andrew expected the boy to walk away after giving his name, but Caleb stayed rooted in place. And then, with a confidence that startled Andrew, he said, "I've seen you here almost every day. Your wife always leaves you by yourself." Andrew tried to offer a polite explanation, something about fresh air, exercise, time for personal reflection, but Caleb cut in. "I think she leaves because she doesn't want to hear what people say when she's gone. I hear things, though. I hear a lot." The way he worded it made Andrew straighten slightly, as if preparing himself for a truth he hadn't asked for. Caleb's footsteps shifted on the gravel, inching a little closer. "I know things about her," he said in a low voice. One that carried the weight of someone who had lived through far more than an 11-year-old should. "I know what she's planning, and I know what she's already done to you." Andrew's mind sharpened. For months, he'd lived with unspoken doubts, nagging instincts that something about his condition wasn't natural. Still, hearing a stranger suggest it out loud jolted him. "What do you mean?" Andrew asked carefully. "What could you possibly know about my wife?" Caleb hesitated, and Andrew sensed the boy weighing whether to continue. "I've been around the park for a long time," Caleb said. "I don't have a place to stay, so I hang out here. People don't notice kids like me. They talk near me, they make calls, they say things they wouldn't say if they knew I was listening." Andrew tried to piece together the direction this conversation was heading, but nothing could have prepared him for Caleb's next sentence. "Your wife doesn't want you to get better," the boy said bluntly. "She wants you to stay exactly the way you are." The words cut through Andrew like a sudden cold wind. "That's an extreme accusation," he replied, although the firmness in his voice wavered. Caleb didn't back down. "She talks on the phone when she leaves you here," he continued. "I stay behind that line of trees over there. I hear everything. She tells someone that things are going as planned, that you're easy to manage, and that she just needs a little more time before everything is secured. She even laughs sometimes. Andrew's stomach tightened, not because he believed the accusations outright, but because he recognized the phrasing. He had heard Victoria use words like managed and secured in tones that didn't feel like they belonged to a supportive spouse. But he needed more than vague claims from a kid who might be misunderstood. You could be mistaken, Andrew said gently. Conversations can be taken out of context. Caleb stepped closer, his voice firm. I'm not mistaken. I heard her talk about your medicine. She said it was working better than she expected. She said the doctors don't suspect anything because she changed your provider before anyone noticed. She even said she'd get everything once the board signs off. Andrew felt a wave of confusion crash into him. He had been switched to a different neurologist months ago, someone Victoria claimed was the best in the Bay Area. He had never questioned it. In fact, he remembered thanking her for the referral. Now the memory felt different, as though a film had been peeled away, revealing something underneath. Caleb could sense Andrew processing the information. I know you don't want to believe me, he said softly. Most grown-ups don't believe kids like me. But I don't get anything out of lying. I don't want your money. I'm just telling you because you look like someone who deserves to know the truth. Andrew let out a slow breath. He wished he could see the boy's face. He wished he could read his expression, judge whether he was being manipulated or fed misinformation. Instead, he had to rely on instinct, a skill he had once mastered but had lost confidence in since losing his sight. Yet something about Caleb felt authentic. His voice lacked calculation. His words didn't curve or sharpen in ways that suggested manipulation. They came out in straightforward bursts, as though the boy had held them in for too long and finally found the courage to release them. What exactly do you think she wants? Andrew asked, his voice lower than before. Caleb answered without hesitation. Everything you built. Everything you own, your company, your name, your power. She already talks like she runs it. She already acts like she doesn't need you anymore. She just needs to finish whatever she started. Andrew heard the tremor in his own breathing, a reaction he struggled to control. He wanted to reject every word, to call for security, to dismiss the conversation as the invention of a troubled child. But the truth was that Caleb's claims aligned too closely with the unease Andrew had experienced for months. Caleb took another step closer. I can help you, he said. I know things that can prove what she's doing. But you have to trust me, even just a little. Because if you don't, she's going to take everything, and you won't even know what happened until it's too late. The conviction in the boy's voice carried a depth that went far beyond his age. Andrew didn't respond right away. He sifted through memories, Victoria guiding him through the house, Victoria giving him medication at night, Victoria insisting he rest while she handled company matters, Victoria stepping away in the park to make phone calls she never explained. For the first time, Andrew felt a crack in the foundation of the life he had been accepting. Something in his world shifted, not dramatically, but enough for him to notice. The boy standing before him might be a stranger, but he was voicing truths Andrew had been too afraid to articulate. And in that moment, Andrew Lawson, once confident, once powerful, realized that the most unexpected source of clarity had just walked out of the shadows and stood before him, offering a chance to uncover a reality he hadn't dared to face. The weight of Caleb's revelations followed Andrew long after their conversation ended. Even after the boy drifted away into the park, blending into the ambient rustle of people and movement around them, Andrew remained seated on the bench, feeling as if someone had taken the world he thought he knew and tilted it slightly off its axis. His blind eyes stared forward at nothing, but his thoughts churned with unrestrained intensity. Part of him wanted to dismiss everything the boy had said. What reason did an 11-year-old homeless kid have to know anything about Victoria Lawson, a woman who carefully curated every room she entered? But another part, deeper, sharper, older, recognized a truth he could no longer shrug off. Certain details Caleb mentioned lined up with suspicions Andrew had been pushing down for months. He tried to recall the changes that had crept into his life. At first, they arrived disguised as care, Victoria reminding him to take his pills, Victoria scheduling appointments without asking, Victoria insisting they move meetings because he looked tired. But then more concerning patterns emerged. His medications shifted to unfamiliar brands, his doctors replaced by specialists he had never chosen, and every attempt he made to understand his own health brushed aside as unnecessary. Victoria had always been meticulous, but recently her meticulousness carried a new edge, one that didn't feel supportive but managerial. Still, Andrew had accepted it because losing his sight had shaken him deeply, and he feared challenging the steady routine that kept him functioning. Yet now a child had ripped the curtain back. What disturbed Andrew most wasn't that Caleb accused Victoria of harming him. It was how calmly the boy had spoken, as if he had spent weeks listening, compiling details, learning Victoria's patterns like an investigator gathering evidence. And then there were Caleb's descriptions of the phone calls. Andrew had occasionally heard Victoria muttering into her phone while she thought he was asleep. He had once asked who she was talking to, and she brushed it off as a corporate crisis. Another time, she said it was a private matter involving her sister. Andrew hadn't pressed her, telling himself he trusted her. Now the memory of those nights took on a new shape, one that tightened his chest. He tried to piece everything together logically. Was it plausible that Victoria would harm him intentionally? For what gain? Yes, she played a more public role in the company now, but she had always been ambitious. That alone wasn't incriminating. What unsettled him more was how rapidly the board had accepted her authority. They used to come to him for every decision, every adaptation, every new strategy. Now they consulted Victoria exclusively, often notifying Andrew only after the fact. He could no longer attend meetings in person, and whenever he joined a virtual one, Victoria muted herself at strategic moments, preventing him from hearing full discussions. He thought she did it to protect him from stress. But what if stress wasn't the thing she was trying to limit? And what about the day he collapsed in his office? He had been reviewing analytics reports when a crushing wave of disorientation hit him. Victoria appeared immediately, too quickly, almost as if she had been waiting. She dismissed everyone else from the room and insisted she handle the situation. Later, she arranged for him to begin new treatments. That was the first time his condition worsened significantly. Andrew hadn't questioned it then because he was terrified. But now, viewed through the lens of Caleb's warnings, the memory felt different. It wasn't a rescue, it felt orchestrated. His mind returned to Caleb again. How could a child know so much? Why would he care? Andrew replayed the boy's tone, his earnestness, the cadence of someone speaking because the truth burned too hot inside him to hold back. Children didn't speak that way unless they had lived around danger long enough to recognize patterns adults missed. Andrew felt a surprising sense of empathy rise in him. Caleb wasn't trying to scare him, he was trying to help. And if everything he said was accurate, then Andrew's life was more precarious than he had ever imagined. He reached carefully for the edge of the bench, steadying himself as he stood. The breeze tugged at his jacket as the scents of eucalyptus and damp grass enveloped him. He tried to orient himself, waiting for Victoria's approaching footsteps he had learned by sound alone. As he stood there listening, he realized how vulnerable he truly was. Victoria could change his surroundings without him knowing. She could guide him into situations or away from information simply by touching his elbow. He relied on her completely, and now that reliance felt like a trap disguised as partnership. Minutes passed. He sensed her presence before hearing her, a shift in the space near him, a familiar perfume layered with something colder, calculation or impatience. He couldn't tell. Ready to go? Victoria asked with her usual polished tone. He nodded automatically, but internally his world trembled. He wanted to confront her, to ask directly about the phone calls, the doctors, the decisions she made without him. But a confrontation would leave him powerless if he misjudged anything, and Victoria held too much influence over his daily life. Even if he tried to leave her, he had nowhere to go without assistance. The realization hit him with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't just blind, he was contained. As Victoria led him toward the car, Andrew focused on the rhythm of her steps, the subtle tension in her grip. He tried to detect something: guilt, fear, irritation, but her movements were expertly measured. She had always been skilled at masking. He once admired that about her, now it felt dangerous. When they reached the car, she helped him inside with the same choreographed care she offered the press during charity galas. Everything she did served two purposes: crafting an image and maintaining control. The drive home blurred into a haze of engine noise, and the faint tapping of Victoria's fingernail on her phone screen. Andrew couldn't tell whether she was texting, reading, or calculating her next move. He felt the distance between them widen, even though they sat only a few feet apart. He thought of Caleb again, how the boy stood close enough for Andrew to sense his sincerity, how he spoke truths no one else dared mention. Andrew wondered where Caleb was now. Did he return to whatever corner of the park he called home? Was he still close enough to observe Victoria's next call? The idea that a child understood his situation better than he did made Andrew's chest ache. By the time they reached the Lawson estate, Andrew knew with certainty that he could no longer ignore what Caleb had told him. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. The pieces hadn't formed a clear picture yet, but he could feel them aligning in ominous ways. He needed answers, and he needed a way to get them without alerting Victoria. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of agency pushing against the fog that had consumed him. He didn't know it yet, but Caleb's intervention had set something irreversible in motion. Whether the boy was right or wrong, Andrew had crossed into a place where blind trust was no longer sustainable. And as he entered his home, guided by the same hand that Caleb claimed was destroying him, Andrew realized that the path forward would require caution, courage, and a new kind of sight entirely. That evening, after returning from the park, Andrew moved through his home with a heightened awareness he hadn't felt in months. Every detail, the placement of furniture, the echo of his cane tapping across the marble floor, the faint shift of air when Victoria walked past him seemed sharper now, as if Caleb's words had tuned his instincts back to life. He made his way to the living room and settled into the leather sofa, listening to the faint hum of the city through the windows. Victoria hovered nearby for a moment before excusing herself to make another phone call. The moment she left the room, Andrew felt a mixture of dread and determination surge through him. He needed clarity, and he needed to start piecing together a timeline of everything that had changed since his health began declining. He focused first on the medications. Before losing his sight, he had always kept meticulous records of everything he put into his body, especially during stressful periods. But once the blindness took hold, he had relinquished that responsibility to Victoria. She organized his pill bottles, scheduled his refills, and even handed him the doses at night. He had assumed it was kindness. Now he questioned every bottle, every dosage, every switch to a new prescription. He remembered one specific night months ago when she insisted he take a newer pill, claiming his doctor had recommended it. He remembered the metallic taste it left in his mouth and how he felt disoriented afterward. It was the first time he experienced the strange mental fog that eventually became constant. The memory made his pulse quicken. Then he thought about his neurological appointments. His original doctor, Wilkins, had been cautious and deliberate. He had asked questions, ordered thorough scans, and seemed genuinely concerned. But then, suddenly, Wilkins retired and Victoria introduced a new specialist who had a polished demeanor and a dismissive attitude. Every time Andrew raised concerns about the rapid decline of his vision, this new doctor insisted it was typical progression. Andrew had believed him because he trusted Victoria's judgment and didn't want to question the people responsible for his care. But as he replayed the interactions, something about the doctor's confidence felt rehearsed, almost scripted. He wondered whether anyone had ever verified the man's credentials. The more Andrew examined his memories, the more connections formed. Each thread led back to Victoria, her choices, her decisions, her strategic redirections. He realized that his decline had been marked by patterns he had overlooked: unusual fatigue after meals she prepared, dizziness on days she insisted he take certain supplements, and the way she dismissed his requests for second opinions. She had woven herself into every aspect of his health under the guise of support. Only now did Andrew recognize the trap disguised as caregiving. His thoughts drifted to his company, Lawson Dynamics. He remembered how the board gradually shifted toward Victoria, how she began attending executive meetings without him, how she urged him to take extended leave for his own good. He had rationalized it as necessary rest, but now he recognized it as a calculated distancing. He recalled a particular board meeting he attended virtually about 2 months ago. Victoria had muted the call twice, claiming the audio was glitching. When it resumed, the tone of the participants had changed. He had asked what he missed, and she replied, "Nothing that concerns you." The phrase replayed in his head now like a warning he had ignored. Andrew leaned back on the sofa, feeling a heavy mixture of anger, betrayal, and clarity. For the first time since his blindness began, he realized he might not be ill by natural causes. His condition might be engineered. And if Caleb was right about Victoria's plans, then the stakes extended far beyond his health. They threatened his entire legacy, his power, his autonomy. The thought lit something inside him, a dormant instinct from his days as a CO navigating cutthroat negotiations. He had been manipulated long enough. Determined to understand exactly when everything had changed, Andrew tried reconstructing the timeline of his deterioration. It started with headaches, sharp, blinding flashes of pain that came out of nowhere. Then came dizzy spells, difficulty focusing, and memory lapses that he assumed were related to stress. But the collapse happened during a product rollout event, when he suddenly lost sensation in his legs and fell. Victoria rushed to him, whisked him away, and took control of his care from that moment forward. Now he wondered whether that collapse had been a natural medical event or the result of something he had ingested, something she had introduced. He forced himself to think deeper, past the haze that had clouded his memory. He recalled overhearing Victoria once say she needed to finalize documents before the board meeting. At the time, he assumed she meant a press release or financial report. But the word finalize echoed now with new meaning, perhaps legal documents related to power of attorney, control of assets, or corporate authority. These were things she could never have acquired while he was fully functioning. But now she could claim he was impaired, unable to make sound decisions, vulnerable, and people would believe her. After all, he lived in darkness. Andrew exhaled slowly, grounding himself. He knew he needed evidence, real, undeniable proof, and he needed allies. Caleb, strangely enough, was the first person to show genuine concern without ulterior motives. But relying on an 11-year-old boy wasn't a long-term solution. He needed professional help. He needed someone who could investigate discreetly, someone who understood both legal and medical frameworks. Someone Victoria couldn't manipulate. The name of a lawyer he once worked with drifted into his mind, Dana Walker, a sharp, unflinching attorney known for her integrity. He hadn't spoken to her in years, but she was the type of person who would see through smoke screens and uncover the truth. Before he could plan how to contact her, he heard Victoria's footsteps returning. He straightened instinctively, masking the storm inside him. She entered the living room with a practiced sweetness in her voice. "Are you doing all right?" she asked, placing a hand on his shoulder. Her touch felt colder now, even though her temperature hadn't changed. Andrew nodded, careful not to reveal the shift in his awareness. If Victoria sensed even a hint of suspicion, she might accelerate her plans or eliminate whatever leverage he had left. She asked about his day, about whether the park was enjoyable, about whether he felt tired. Her questions came flowing with mechanical grace, each one crafted to maintain her role as caretaker. But Andrew heard what lay beneath the words: control, monitoring, assessment. He answered softly, giving away nothing. Inside, however, a storm brewed with purpose. As the evening progressed, Andrew recognized that if he wanted the truth, he would have to tread carefully. He couldn't confront Victoria. He couldn't alter his routine abruptly. Every step forward would need to be done in a way that preserved her belief that he was still the compliant, weakened husband she had molded. But he wasn't that man anymore. Not after Caleb, not after connecting the dots he had ignored. He realized, too, that he could no longer rely solely on memory. He needed to document everything, every dosage, every conversation, every moment that felt manipulated. Even blind, he could use tools, voice recorders, audio logs, tactile notes. He would rebuild his awareness brick by brick. The first battle had already begun, though he hadn't fully acknowledged it. He had shifted from a passive participant in his own decline to an observer gathering intelligence. The next step would be the hardest, moving from observation to action. And in the depths of his darkened world, a new resolve formed. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and he would no longer ignore the signs. Andrew Lawson wanted answers, and this time no one would stop him from finding them. The next day in Golden Gate Park, Andrew arrived with a new purpose. He walked slower than usual, deliberately timing each step so he could focus on the sounds around him. He listened for the usual markers, the distant chatter near the playground, the rhythmic squeak of an old bicycle chain, the breeze through the Monterey pines, not because these sounds comforted him, because he needed to be aware of everything. Victoria guided him to the same bench as always. Her hand rested on his arm with a lightness that would normally feel gentle, but today her touch felt like an anchor tied around him. He sensed she was distracted, though. She checked her phone repeatedly, murmuring about a board update she needed to review. When she finally stepped away to take a quick call, Andrew felt his heartbeat intensify. This was the window he had hoped for. He waited, listening for any indication that someone approached. For nearly a minute, all he heard were passing footsteps and distant birds. Then, soft and cautious, came the steps he recognized from the afternoon before, light, uneven, slightly hurried. Caleb had returned. "You came back," Andrew said quietly, angling his head toward the sound. The boy let out a breath that carried both relief and urgency. "I had to," Caleb replied. "I wasn't sure if you believed me yesterday." Andrew paused. "I don't know what I believe yet. But I'm listening." Those words seemed to open something in Caleb. The boy moved closer, confidence growing as he spoke. "I watched her again," he said. "I saw where she walked after she left you yesterday. She went behind the trees and called someone. She said she needed a document sent by tonight. She said everything was almost ready, and then she laughed like none of it mattered." Andrew stiffened. The description matched what he feared, Victoria tying up loose ends. Caleb continued, lowering his voice. "She said your condition was progressing faster than expected. She said the company would be hers soon because no one questions a grieving wife." The words struck Andrew like a physical blow. He clenched his jaw, pulling in a sharp breath. Hearing the possibility of his own death spoken aloud even secondhand shook him in a way no symptom or doctor's note ever had. But he stayed composed. Caleb, he said, choosing his words carefully, I need you to tell me everything you've heard, every detail. The boy nodded quickly. I've been listening for weeks, he said, surprising Andrew. I didn't know who she was at first, but she comes here a lot. She's always on her phone, always talking like she's in charge. I heard her say she changed your doctor because he asked too many questions. I heard her complain that you weren't as weak as she hoped yet. I didn't know I should tell you until I realized you were the man she kept talking about. A chill ran through Andrew. Weeks this had been happening for weeks. He swallowed hard, trying to remain focused. Why tell me? He asked. Why risk getting involved? Caleb hesitated, his voice softening. Because people shouldn't lose everything just because someone else is greedy. And because you re the only person who's ever talked to me like I mattered. Andrew felt a tightness in his throat that had nothing to do with fear. He didn't know much about Caleb, but he could hear sincerity in every word. All right, Andrew said, if I'm going to stop her, I need help. But you have to be careful. She can't know you rewatching her. Caleb straightened, eager and determined. I'm already careful, he said. She doesn't even look around. She thinks no one notices her. Andrew exhaled slowly. It was unsettling how accurate that seemed. Victoria had always believed she was smarter than everyone else, especially those she thought beneath her. She would never suspect a boy in threadbare clothes hiding among the trees. Andrew leaned forward slightly. Caleb, can you follow her after she leaves me each day? Listen for anything that might tell us what she's planning. The boy nodded instantly. I can. I know that area better than anyone. Nobody pays attention to kids out here. Andrew felt something shift inside him, a strange combination of hope and dread. He wasn't alone anymore. For the first time since his collapse, someone stood on his side, even if that someone was small and fragile by the world's standards. And oddly, that made the alliance feel even more powerful. But Andrew knew he couldn't rely on Caleb entirely. There were risks. A child could only gather so much information. Eventually, Andrew needed someone with legal skill and authority. But for now, Caleb was the only person who could observe Victoria without drawing suspicion. I will find a way to contact someone who can help us, Andrew said, a lawyer, someone I trust. But I need evidence first, proof of what she's doing. Caleb's voice sharpened with determination. I'll get it. I'll listen, I'll watch, I'll remember everything. She won't know. Andrew nodded, feeling a resolve forming within him. Good, he said, but I need you to understand this is dangerous. If she finds out someone knows what she's doing, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Caleb responded confidently. I'm used to danger. This isn't the worst thing I've been around. Andrew's chest tightened again, but this time out of compassion. What kind of life had this boy endured that made corporate sabotage and potential poisoning seem manageable? Footsteps approached in the distance. Victoria. Andrew could tell by her confident stride and the sharp click of her heels. Caleb noticed too and backed away quickly. I will talk to you tomorrow, he whispered before retreating behind the trees, disappearing as if he had never been there. Seconds later, Victoria arrived. Sorry to keep you waiting, she said with a warm tone Andrew no longer trusted. Her fingers brushed his arm as she added, everything okay? You look tense. He forced a neutral expression. Just thinking, he replied. About work, about the board, she gave a rehearsed laugh. You worry too much. That's why I handle things now. Her words no longer soothed him. They grated against the truth he now carried. But Andrew didn't let any of it show. He let her guide him, let her speak, let her continue believing she controlled every piece of the game. Because for the first time in months, Andrew realized something: Victoria wasn't the only one playing. And thanks to a boy no one cared to notice, Andrew finally had the first piece he needed: a witness. As they walked away from the bench, Andrew kept his face calm, his posture relaxed, his voice steady. But beneath that controlled exterior, he was no longer the weakened, compliant man she believed him to be. He was calculating, planning, anticipating. And though he could not see the path ahead, he could feel its shape forming. Caleb had given him something priceless: information. But more than that, he had given him back a sense of agency. Tomorrow the boy would return. And tomorrow Andrew would take the next step toward reclaiming his life. 2 days after Andrew decided he needed legal help, he woke up with a clear objective: he had to contact Dana Walker. It sounded simple, but nothing in his life was simple anymore, not when every movement, every phone call, every conversation was subtly overseen by a woman who had perfected the art of appearing supportive while tightening control. Andrew knew he had to act with precision. If Victoria detected even a hint of rebellion, she would cut off his freedoms entirely. He couldn't risk that. He needed time to call Dana, time to gather evidence, time to plan. He started by watching Victoria's patterns more closely. For months, he had drifted through the house following her cues without thinking, accepting whatever she said as truth. Now he paid attention. He learned that she always left the house at 10:30 a.m. for meetings that were rarely confirmed on her calendar. He learned she kept her phone on her at all times, locking it with a complicated passcode he couldn't hope to guess. He learned that the house staff, once friendly and open, had grown strangely reserved, speaking only briefly with him before glancing nervously toward the hallways, as if they feared being overheard. In small, subtle ways, Victoria had reshaped everyone around them. He wondered, had anyone else noticed her behavior? Had she manipulated them too? On the third morning after meeting Caleb, fortune briefly favored Andrew. Victoria received an urgent message just after breakfast and rushed out of the house earlier than usual. She offered him medication before leaving, but Andrew pretended he had already taken it. She didn't question him, her attention divided between her phone and a folder she clutched tightly. When the front door closed, Andrew listened carefully for any movement in the hallway, any indication she might return. The house stayed still. He steadied himself with the edge of the counter, then moved toward the study by memory, counting each step. His cane tapped against hardwood floors as he made his way toward the desk where his old landline phone sat. When he reached the desk, he let his fingers sweep across the surface, searching for the phone's shape. He found it with its keypad raised enough for him to distinguish the numbers by touch. His heartbeat thudded in his ears as he pressed the buttons. He remembered Dana's office number from years ago. She had once represented Lawson Dynamics in a federal contract negotiation, and Andrew had been impressed by her strength, intellect, and unshakable moral core. If anyone could help him now, it was her. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Walker Law Group, a receptionist, answered briskly. Andrew hesitated. He hadn't said his own name on a phone without Victoria present in months. "This is Andrew Lawson," he began, voice steady but low. "I need to speak with Dana. It's urgent." The receptionist paused, likely surprised to hear from him directly. After a too long moment, she said, "Please hold." The line clicked. Andrew waited. His breathing grew shallow. He feared Victoria might walk in suddenly, feared the receptionist would deny the call, feared Dana wouldn't remember him. But then a familiar voice came through, sharp, warm, and focused all at once. "Andrew, is that really you?" Relief hit him so strongly he had to place a hand on the desk to steady himself. "Dana, I need help." She didn't waste time. "Tell me what's going on." He lowered his voice further. "Not over the phone. I can't risk it. I think something is happening around me, something involving my health, my company, my wife." He expected disbelief, but Dana didn't question him. "All right," she said simply, "then we need to meet. Name the place." Andrew hesitated. He didn't know how to get anywhere alone. Every driver, every staff member, every schedule was controlled by Victoria. Dana must have sensed his dilemma. "If you can't leave the house safely, I'll come to you," she offered. He swallowed. "Not yet. Let me figure out a way. I'll contact you again soon." "Andrew," she said gently, "are you in danger?" He didn't answer. He ended the call, knowing silence was safer than confirmation. He placed the phone down carefully, feeling the world shift around him. For the first time in months, he had taken a step without Victoria's approval. It was exhilarating and terrifying. Andrew was about to leave the study when he heard a faint creak in the hallway. His pulse surged. Someone was home. He froze, trying to gauge the direction of the sound. Another creak, footsteps light but distinct, approached the doorway. "Mr. Lawson," a voice whispered. He recognized it instantly. Elena, one of the housekeepers. She spoke quietly, as though afraid of being overheard. Andrew relaxed slightly, though not entirely. "Elena," he said, "how long have you been there?" "I knocked," she said softly. "You didn't hear. Mrs. Lawson asked me to bring you tea." Her voice trailed off, uneasy. Andrew sensed she wanted to say more. He stepped closer. "How long has Victoria been home?" She hesitated. "She isn't. I came from the kitchen." But another pause, heavier this time. "You should be careful, Mr. Lawson." The warning hit him with unexpected force. "Careful of what?" he pressed. Elena's breaths grew shaky. "I shouldn't say anything," she whispered. "Please don't tell her I spoke to you. Just be careful." Before he could ask another question, she hurried away, her footsteps fading quickly down the hall. The interaction left Andrew rattled. Elena knew something. Maybe the staff knew more than he realized. Maybe they were afraid to speak. If Victoria was intimidating them, or worse, they were part of the puzzle he hadn't considered. The house he lived in, the staff he trusted, the routines he followed, none of it was neutral anymore. That afternoon, when Victoria drove him to Golden Gate Park again, Andrew felt the weight of his new secret pressing against his ribs. He didn't speak much on the ride, afraid she would sense something different in him. She chattered casually about board meetings, scheduling, and meetings with attorneys he didn't recognize, lawyers she claimed were helping streamline operations. He wondered whether these were the same lawyers preparing documents to sideline him permanently. At the park, her phone buzzed within moments of their arrival. As usual, she stepped away. Andrew sat up straighter, listening for Caleb. He didn't have to wait long. The boy appeared beside him almost immediately. "You look different today," Caleb said, "like you made a decision." Andrew nodded. "I contacted someone, a lawyer." Caleb grinned. "Good, you were fighting back." But Andrew shook his head slightly. "This is only the beginning. We still need proof." Caleb's expression tightened with determination. "Then I'll get more. I heard her yesterday talking about transferring something, money, property. I couldn't hear everything, but I'll figure it out." Andrew placed a hand on the bench, wishing he could see the boy's face. "Caleb," he said quietly, "I need you to be careful. If she senses someone's watching her." "She won't," he cut in confidently. "People like her don't look down. They never see who's right under them." A small, grim smile touched Andrew's lips. "You might be right." As Victoria approached again, Caleb slipped away into the trees. Andrew straightened, preparing to re-enter the role he had played for months, the obedient, dependent husband. But inside, something entirely different had taken shape. He had an ally. He had a lawyer willing to help. And most importantly, he had rediscovered a fragment of his old self, the part that strategized, predicted, and fought. Victoria still believed she controlled the board, the house, the staff, and his life. But what she didn't know was that Andrew Lawson had begun to awaken. And once he started, there would be no stopping him. Over the next week, Victoria's behavior began shifting into an even more calculated rhythm. One Andrew could finally perceive now that he was actively watching her. She woke earlier, left earlier, returned later. She no longer asked him casual questions about how he felt or whether he slept well. Instead, she assessed him with pointed inquiries, questions that felt less like concern and more like probing for weakness. "Have you been confused lately?" she asked one morning while tightening the straps on his wrist brace. "Any trouble remembering things? Feeling unstable?" Each question seemed designed to construct a narrative, one she could later present as medical evidence. Andrew answered carefully, choosing responses that sounded compliant without giving her anything that could be used against him. He had no intention of helping her build a case for his incompetence. Meanwhile, Victoria's activity with the board escalated. She held meetings at the house with the doors closed. She brought in legal teams for strategy sessions that excluded him entirely, and she frequently spoke to Mayor Holloway, her attorney, whom Andrew had always considered untrustworthy even before he understood the full extent of her intentions. Holloway's voice, deep and overly smooth, carried through the hallways despite her attempts to stay private. Andrew couldn't make out the words, but the tone held a polished confidence that made the hair on his arms rise. Whatever he and Victoria planned was happening soon. One afternoon, while walking through the foyer, Andrew paused upon hearing Victoria speaking sharply into her phone. Her voice, low and firm, carried a tone that made him instinctively freeze. "The paperwork will be finalized before Friday," she said. "Once the board signs off, I'll have full authority to act without him. Yes, medical and corporate, both." There was a long pause. "No, he hasn't suspected a thing. He's barely capable of understanding what day it is." Andrew's jaw tightened. The way she spoke about him as if he were an object, an obstacle, something to remove, sent a cold heaviness through his chest. She continued, "Once the evaluations are complete, they'll determine he can't make decisions. I've already arranged the appointments. And after that, everything proceeds as planned." Her tone carried absolute certainty. She believed she had already won. That sentence alone nearly broke Andrew's composure. He realized then that whatever she was planning to do, seize control, rewrite power of attorney, maybe even institutionalize him, it was happening with ruthless speed. He didn't have months, he had days. And if he didn't gather evidence soon, her narrative would become the official truth. She would remake him into an invalid on paper, no matter how capable he felt inside. That night, Andrew lay awake in his bed, replaying the pieces he'd gathered: Caleb's warnings, Elena's fear, Victoria's manipulative questions, Holloway's involvement. Everything pointed toward an imminent legal move intended to strip him of control entirely. He understood then that his window of action was closing. Tomorrow, he told himself, tomorrow he would speak with Caleb again. And tomorrow he would contact Dana with the full truth, even if he had to do it while Victoria slept. But the next morning brought complications he hadn't anticipated. Victoria woke him earlier than usual with a tone bright enough to seem rehearsed. "Andrew, we have a big day ahead," she said while pulling open the curtains. "Your neurologist needs updated assessments. I scheduled an appointment for this afternoon." Something inside Andrew hardened. These were the evaluations she mentioned on the phone. If he attended, she could easily manipulate the results, coaching the doctor to label him incompetent. "I'm not feeling well," he tried. It wasn't entirely untrue. The stress had left him exhausted, but Victoria dismissed his attempt. "This isn't optional," she said lightly. "It's important for your care." Her grip on his arm tightened slightly when guiding him to the table for breakfast. The message was clear: refusal would not be tolerated. During breakfast, she chatted about mundane things: fundraisers, corporate dinners, renovations to the guest wing, while Andrew strategized quietly. He couldn't attend that appointment without putting everything at risk. But refusing outright would expose his resistance. He needed a way to redirect her without alerting suspicion. "Can we reschedule?" he asked calmly. "I'd prefer to go when I'm rested." "I haven't been sleeping well." She paused just a moment too long. "No," she said sweetly, "this one is important." Her insistence confirmed his fears. She was accelerating her plan. That afternoon, when they reached Golden Gate Park, Victoria's restlessness showed through her polished demeanor. She stayed only a few minutes before excusing herself to take a call. Andrew listened in all directions. Caleb appeared almost immediately, breathless as if he'd been waiting. "I think something's happening today," the boy said. "She was talking to some guy near the parking lot this morning. She said you need to be evaluated before Friday. And she said once the forms are signed, the board can move forward." Andrew clenched the bench edge. "I know. She told someone the same thing at home." Caleb leaned closer. "What does that mean? What's she trying to do?" Andrew exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of saying it out loud. "If she convinces my doctors that I'm not mentally capable, she can take control of my estate, my decisions, everything. And if she gets the board to support her, she'll take my company as well. After that, she won't need me." Caleb's voice dropped. "Won't need you alive?" The question hung heavy in the air. Andrew didn't answer. He didn't have to. Caleb's determination sharpened. "You can't go to that appointment. She's setting a trap." Andrew nodded. "I know. I need a reason to avoid it without raising her suspicion." The boy thought rapidly. "Fake a symptom," he said. "Something she can't prove wrong right away." Andrew considered this, then shook his head. "If I pretend to collapse, she'll call emergency services. They'll take control, not her. I'd lose the ability to move freely." Caleb tried again. "What about telling her you took the wrong medication by accident? Something that means the appointment needs to be rescheduled." Andrew paused. That idea might work. Victoria monitored his medications obsessively. If he claimed he messed up the dosage, she couldn't risk the doctor discovering what she'd been giving him without proper documentation. "She would postpone. That could buy me a day," Andrew murmured. "Maybe 2. Caleb nodded quickly. "Then tell the lawyer everything today. Don't wait. She's moving fast." Andrew felt a jolt of urgency. He had planned to contact Dana at night, but Caleb was right. Every hour mattered now. "I will contact her tonight," Andrew said. "And tomorrow I will start gathering the evidence she needs." Before Andrew could say more, Victoria's footsteps approached sharply. Caleb darted behind the trees with practiced speed. Victoria, breath slightly elevated from walking quickly, spoke with a tight cheerfulness. "Ready to head to your appointment." Andrew steadied himself and replied calmly, "I think I made a mistake this morning. I might have taken the wrong medication. I've felt off since breakfast." He let his shoulders sag slightly, not too dramatically, but enough. Victoria froze. Andrew didn't need vision to know she was calculating. He could almost feel her mind racing. If the doctor examined him with the wrong medication in his system, they might uncover inconsistencies. They might ask questions she couldn't deflect. She couldn't risk it. After a long pause, she said, "All right, we'll reschedule, but you need to be more careful." Her tone was firm but laced with relief that she could maintain control of the narrative. As she guided him back toward the car, Andrew maintained a composed expression. But inside he felt something ignite, a spark of victory. A small one, but meaningful. He had delayed her, he had outmaneuvered her. And now, with Caleb's help and Dana waiting for his call, the tide was beginning to shift. Victoria believed she still controlled everything. But Andrew Lawson had just bought himself time. And time was the one resource he needed to bring her entire plan crashing down. That night, the house felt heavier than usual. Victoria retired to her personal office after dinner, claiming she needed to prepare for a critical board presentation, which gave Andrew the stretch of time he desperately needed. He waited until he heard the faint closing of her office door and the hum of her computer starting up. Only then did he move. His hands glided along the edge of his nightstand until he found the small recorder he had hidden beneath a stack of old books earlier that morning. It wasn't sophisticated, just a pocket-sized device, but it was enough. He could no longer rely solely on memory. He needed a record. He needed timestamps, events, conversations, anything that could later be used to build a case. His life depended on precision now. He pressed the record button, letting the device capture his voice as he spoke quietly. "Day 1, he murmured. "Victoria attempted to take me to a neurological evaluation I did not consent to. She insisted it was necessary. I suspect it was meant to document cognitive decline. He paused, steadying his breath. I avoided the appointment, claimed medication confusion. She accepted the excuse temporary success. He continued logging details, what he heard her say on the phone, the changes in her behavior, the tension in the house staff. When he finished, he tucked the recorder into the inner pocket of his jacket. He would carry it from now on. If Victoria said something actionable, he wanted it captured. But logging information wasn't enough. Andrew needed a broader strategy, one that involved both gathering intelligence and reclaiming some measure of strength. His handicap no longer felt like a limitation, it had become a weapon. Victoria assumed he lived in a fog, unaware of what she orchestrated. But in truth, he had begun navigating the world differently. His hearing, sharper now from necessity, caught subtleties he once ignored, the difference between Victoria's normal stride and her stressed stride. The rustle of documents being moved in the office, the shift in tone when she switched from speaking to him to speaking to her allies. He realized he had an advantage she didn't anticipate. She underestimated him, and he planned to use that. The next morning, Victoria woke in an unusually pleasant mood. Her voice carried a practiced cheerfulness as she announced she had rescheduled his neurological evaluation for the next afternoon. "This will give you time to get back on your normal medication routine," she said, pouring him coffee. Her tone was polished, too polished, and Andrew caught something sharp beneath the surface: anticipation, maybe even triumph. She believed she had regained control of the timeline. Andrew pretended to accept it. "That sounds fine," he said softly, hiding the strategy forming in his mind. He only needed one more day to get his evidence to Dana. Later, during the car ride to the park, Victoria filled the air with a monologue about corporate governance and future expansion plans. Her words flowed like a rehearsed script meant to sound impressive but carried no warmth. Andrew nodded occasionally, playing the part she expected, the fading husband uninterested in business matters. But inside he dissected every phrase. Each boost, each implied victory, each reference to the board's confidence in her told him her plan was further along than he feared. At the park, Victoria stayed longer than usual before stepping away to take a call. Andrew waited until she was far enough that her voice blurred into background noise before calling softly, "Caleb." The boy appeared almost instantly, as though he had been watching the moment Victoria stepped back. Today his steps were quicker, his breathing slightly urgent. "She's getting worse," he said without preamble. "She talked to that guy again, the one with the fancy suit. She said tomorrow you'll be evaluated properly." She sounded happy about it. "Like it means everything is going her way." Andrew nodded grimly. "That's what I expected. She wants the doctor to declare me unfit." Caleb's voice wavered with frustration. "How can she get away with this? It's not fair." Andrew managed a faint smile. "People like her don't think about fairness. They think about winning. But she doesn't know we're fighting back." Caleb took a deep breath. "I found something else," he said. "She got an email this morning. I saw her screen. It said transfer authorization awaits final signatures. And it had your company's logo at the top." The boy's voice tightened. "I think she's already moving your shares." Andrew felt a wave of cold dread hit him. If she gained full authority over his finances, everything, his personal assets, his corporate holdings, his intellectual property would legally become hers. His entire legacy could be erased in a matter of signatures. "Caleb," Andrew said slowly, "I need you to do something important. Tomorrow she's taking me to the doctor. We can't avoid it forever. But I need to make sure someone knows where I am, in case something goes wrong." Caleb's breath hitched. "Wrong how?" Andrew didn't spare him the truth. "If she controls the doctor, she can have me committed. If that happens, you need to tell Dana exactly where they took me." Caleb nodded fiercely. "I'll follow. I don't care how far. I'll stay out of sight." Andrew leaned slightly toward the boy. "And one more thing. If she says anything unusual today, anything about plans, transfers, documents, try to remember exact phrasing. Words matter." Caleb puffed out his chest with determination. "I can do that. I've been practicing. I remember everything she says now." Andrew felt a flicker of pride in the boy. "You helping save my life, Caleb. I won't forget that." Their conversation ended abruptly when Victoria's footsteps approached. Caleb disappeared behind the trees as naturally as a shadow slipping out of view. Victoria arrived with her cheerful mask restored, ready to head home. She asked in a tone far too bright for the tension Andrew now felt radiating from her. He nodded, letting her guide him, while his mind moved briskly through the list of things he needed to do that night. Record everything again. Contact Dana, prepare the strategy for tomorrow's appointment, and anticipate Victoria's next move. Back home, Andrew excused himself early, claiming he needed rest before the evaluation. He retreated to his room and locked the door, something he rarely did, which might raise suspicion, so he unlocked it a moment later. He couldn't risk Victoria asking why. Instead, he settled at his bedside table, feeling for the recorder. He pressed the button. Day 2, he murmured, her plan is accelerating. She received a transfer authorization. Tomorrow is the evaluation she requires to establish full control. He paused as his emotions tightened. I believe she intends to remove me from my position and possibly from my life. He placed the recorder back into his jacket, ensuring it was easy to activate tomorrow. For the first time in months, Andrew's mind felt sharp again. Fear sharpened it, purpose shaped it. He no longer drifted through his days as a passive patient. He was constructing a counterstrike. And though he couldn't see the path ahead, he felt its urgency in every breath. Tomorrow would be dangerous. Tomorrow could be the day Victoria seized everything. But tomorrow could also be the day Andrew Lawson began taking it all back. The morning of the evaluation felt different from the start. The air in the Lawson estate carried a tense undercurrent, a pressure Andrew sensed even before he sat up in bed. Victoria moved briskly through the room, her heels striking the floor with the kind of energy people had when they were close to achieving something monumental. She greeted him with bright enthusiasm, but beneath that polished voice Andrew detected a subtle urgency. Today's the day we get real answers about your condition, she said while straightening his shirt collar. It's important you cooperate fully. Her hands lingered on his shoulders a moment longer than necessary, as if making sure he understood the implied command. Andrew simply nodded. He needed her to believe he intended to comply. After breakfast, she guided him to the car with a renewed firmness in her grip. The drive felt longer than usual. She didn't speak much, which was unusual for her. Instead, she tapped her phone repeatedly, sending messages that sounded like final instructions. Andrew couldn't read them, but he didn't need to. He could sense she believed today would cement her victory. Her lawyer had likely prepped the neurologist, the board was probably on standby, and the paperwork Caleb mentioned was waiting for a single signature. She wanted today to be conclusive. Andrew planned to make it anything but. When they arrived at the clinic, the air carried a sterile chill. This wasn't the office of his original doctor. It had a newer smell, like fresh paint and recently installed equipment. Victoria walked slightly ahead of him, confident and comfortable, announcing their arrival to the receptionist with a tone that dripped authority. Appointment for Mr. Lawson, she said. We expected? The receptionist responded with a level of deference that told Andrew everything. Victoria had prepared this place thoroughly. They were escorted to a private examination room. Andrew felt the cushioned chair beneath him and the faint scent of disinfectant. Victoria sat close enough that he could feel her presence at his side. The doctor will be in shortly, she told him. Remember, answer everything honestly. The emphasis she placed on honestly felt like another warning. She wanted him to portray decline, dependency, confusion. She needed the doctor to document incompetence. The door opened. The neurologist's voice entered the room, smooth, confident, and overly friendly. Mr. Lawson, good to meet you again. Andrew recognized his cadence. This was the same specialist Victoria introduced months ago, the one who dismissed concerns with rehearsed ease. Andrew greeted him calmly, keeping his tone neutral. The doctor began asking routine questions, memory tests, cognitive checks, descriptions of symptoms. Andrew answered carefully, offering responses that demonstrated awareness without displaying skepticism. He had to sound stable, grounded, capable. Every word mattered. Victoria occasionally interjected with comments disguised as concern. He forgets things sometimes, he gets confused. He has trouble making decisions. Each statement chipped away at the narrative Andrew attempted to build. He finally responded lightly, I think anyone would struggle a little under so much stress, the doctor hummed thoughtfully. He continued the evaluation with a series of physical tests following finger movements, identifying sounds, recalling words. Andrew performed each task as accurately as he could without vision. When asked about his memory, he recited dates, events, and details he had rehearsed the night before. The doctor grew quieter as the exam progressed, his easy confidence fading. Eventually, the doctor asked Victoria to step out briefly. Her hesitation was visible in the way she shifted her weight before agreeing. When the door closed behind her, the doctor lowered his voice. Mr. Lawson, I need to ask you something without your wife present. Do you feel safe at home? The question stunned him. For a moment, Andrew considered revealing everything, every suspicion, every pattern, every threat. But he couldn't risk miscalculating. He didn't know if the doctor was part of Victoria's plan or if he genuinely sensed something was wrong. He replied carefully, I feel monitored. I'd like more autonomy. It was vague but truthful. The doctor took a long breath. Your wife has expressed concerns about your judgment. She's pushing for legal support to make decisions on your behalf. I need to document whether that's necessary. The edge in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely convinced by her claims. Andrew seized the moment. I assure you, he said steadily, I am capable of managing my own affairs. What I need is clarity about my health, not decisions made for me. The doctor made a noncommittal sound, then said, I'll finalize my report this afternoon. When Victoria returned, she studied both men carefully, as though trying to interpret whatever had transpired in her absence. But before she could ask anything, the doctor informed her, the evaluation is complete. We will contact you soon. His professionalism masked any conclusions he had reached. On the ride home, Victoria's composure cracked. She questioned him repeatedly. What did he ask? What did you say? Did he mention anything unusual? Her voice sharpened with each inquiry. Andrew answered as calmly as possible. Routine questions, he said. I responded truthfully. Nothing more. She didn't respond, but he could practically feel her mind racing beside him. Something about the exam hadn't gone the way she planned. Back at home, she retreated to her office. Andrew moved to the living room, pretending to rest on the couch while listening closely to the muffled conversation through her partially closed office door. Her voice rose with irritation. He was too composed. She snapped to Mr. Holloway. No confusion at all. If the doctor doesn't report limitations, this becomes much harder. We need leverage, Holloway replied in a low, steady tone. Then create it. If the medical road isn't strong enough, we pursue the corporate one. Victoria exhaled sharply. The board meeting is tonight. If they vote to restructure, Andrew loses all decision-making authority, with or without medical documentation. Andrew's chest tightened. Tonight, the board would decide tonight whether he remained in control of the empire he built. And he wasn't invited. Victoria had engineered the perfect ambush. He felt for the recorder in his pocket. He pressed the button, capturing everything: her tone, her words, her intent. This was the evidence Dana needed. Hours later, while Victoria dressed for the board meeting, Andrew sat on the edge of the bed with the recorder clutched in his hand. As soon as she left, he called Dana. It's happening tonight, he said. She's forcing a vote to remove me. Dana didn't hesitate. I'm on my way, she said. Don't go anywhere. And Andrew, stay strong. You're not alone. As the sun dipped behind the San Francisco skyline, Andrew felt a shift inside him, not fear, resolve. Tonight would be the confrontation. Tonight, everything would be exposed. And tonight, Victoria Lawson would learn that the man she tried to weaken had been rebuilding his strength in the dark. As evening settled over the city, the Lawson estate felt strangely hollow, as if the walls themselves sensed the coming collision between truth and deceit. The board meeting was scheduled to begin in less than an hour. Victoria dressed with a confidence that bordered on triumph, her heels clicking sharply across the room as she gathered her folders, digital files, and the sleek briefcase that contained Andrew's new documents she hoped would secure her complete dominion over everything he had built. She kissed his cheek before leaving, a gesture so controlled it carried no warmth at all. Rest, she told him. This will be a big night for us. Andrew merely nodded, keeping his expression neutral. She left without realizing those would be the last moments she ever held unchecked influence over him. The moment the front door closed, Andrew reached for his phone and dialed Dana. She had promised she was on her way, and true to her word, she arrived within minutes. Her footsteps were brisk, purposeful, every sound filled with intention. When she entered his room, her voice carried a steady strength. Are you ready? She asked. Andrew turned toward her, relief and gratitude mixing with the tension pulsing through his body. I have recordings, he said. I have evidence of her intent, her conversations, her manipulation, and Caleb, the boy I mentioned, has witnessed multiple interactions. He can verify everything. Dana placed a reassuring hand on his arm. Good. Tonight we take this back. They left the estate with urgency. Dana guided him firmly yet respectfully, nothing like controlling grip Victoria used. The drive across San Francisco toward the Lawson Dynamics skyscraper pulsed with an electric charge. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and blue against the car windows, unseen by Andrew but described vividly by Dana so he could envision the world he was about to re-enter. For months he had been hidden away, molded into a helpless figure. Tonight, he would step into the heart of the empire he built and expose the betrayal festering within it. At the corporate headquarters, Dana steered him through the lobby, where employees paused in shock. Some gasped, some whispered, others stared openly. Andrew Lawson, the founder they had been told was too frail to attend meetings, had arrived with his chin lifted, guided not by weakness but by determination. Word spread quickly. By the time they reached the executive floor, murmurs filled the hallways. He's here. Is he really back? I thought Victoria said he was unfit. The boardroom doors were shut, and through them Andrew could hear the crisp cadence of Victoria's voice. She was mid-presentation. With his progressive decline, she said confidently, it has become impossible for Andrew to fulfill his responsibilities. As such, we must transfer executive authority to ensure the continuity of Lawson dynamics. I have prepared the necessary documentation. Dana pushed the doors open. The room froze. Victoria's words stopped mid-sentence, the triumph draining from her face as she saw Andrew standing beside Dana. Her shock morphed into fury so quickly it nearly cracked the mask she always wore. "Andrew," she said, her voice tight, "this isn't a good idea. You should be resting." She moved toward him as if to escort him out, but Dana stepped between them with attorney-like precision. "He's not here to rest," Dan announced. "He's here to speak." The board members exchanged bewildered glances. Some looked guilty, already complicit in Victoria's plan. Others looked relieved, as if they had doubted her story but felt powerless to question it. The chairman cleared his throat. "Lawson," he said carefully, "we weren't expecting." "I know," Andrew interrupted. His voice, though not booming, carried more weight than he had managed in months. "But it's my company, and I will be heard." He stepped forward, gripping his cane tightly. He addressed the board with an authority he feared he had lost but now rediscovered deep within him. "You've been told I'm confused, that I've lost the ability to lead, that my health decline makes me unfit." He lifted his chin, "But none of that is true. I am here because the person standing beside me, my wife, has spent months manipulating my medical care, controlling my environment, and orchestrating my decline." Gasps rippled across the table. Victoria's expression twisted. "This is absurd," she snapped. "He's been disoriented for months. He doesn't know what he's saying." Dana opened a folder and pressed a button on her tablet. Victoria's recorded voice filled the room. "Once the evaluations are complete, they'll determine he can't make decisions after that. Everything proceeds as planned." The board members stiffened. Holloway, seated beside Victoria, shifted uncomfortably. Dana played another clip. "He's easy to manage. Once the board signs off, everything will be secured." Several board members looked at Victoria with a mix of betrayal and horror. Victoria lunged toward Dana, but Andrew's voice cut through the room. "There's more. She changed my doctors without my consent. She monitored every conversation. She forced medications on me that worsened my condition. And she attempted to arrange evaluations meant to strip me of my autonomy." Victoria's mask shattered. "This is ridiculous." "He has no proof." "I have witnesses," Andrew said. "Multiple." He gestured toward the doors. On cue, Caleb stepped inside, escorted by building security Dana had arranged to support them. The boy looked small in the massive boardroom, but his presence radiated courage. Victoria's eyes widened, fury igniting. "You," she hissed. "You were that little pest from the park." "Caleb has overheard every conversation you thought was private," Dana said sharply. "He heard your plans. He watched your movements. And he documented them." Caleb lifted his chin. "You said you didn't need him anymore. You said everything would be yours once he was declared unfit." The room erupted in murmurs again. Victoria turned to the board, desperation breaking through her polished exterior. "You can't seriously believe this. He's blind, confused, manipulated by a street kid." "Enough," the chairman said firmly. He looked at Andrew. "Mr. Lawson, do you wish to retain control of your company?" Andrew nodded slowly. "I do, and I intend to lead it again." The board members whispered among themselves. It didn't take long. The chairman raised his hand. "All in favor of returning full executive authority to Andrew Lawson?" Hands went up around the table, nearly every one of them. Victoria let out a strangled noise. "You can't do this," she spat. "You can't take everything from me." "You did that to yourself," Andrew replied. Security escorted her and Holloway out as she hurled accusations and threats that dissolved into nothing. Andrew simply stood, feeling the power he once held return to him, not through sight, but through truth. The board approached him with a mixture of respect and remorse. Dana placed a steadying hand on his arm. Caleb watched with quiet pride. Andrew Lawson, blind yet stronger than ever, had reclaimed his company, his autonomy, and his voice. And though darkness surrounded him physically, he had never seen the truth more clearly. The story of Andrew Lawson teaches one of the most profound truths about human nature. Danger does not always come from strangers, dramatic events, or external threats. Sometimes the most devastating harm grows quietly within the circle of trust. Andrew spent years believing that loyalty, love, and marriage automatically guaranteed safety. But trust that is never questioned becomes a weakness. His blindness was not just physical. It was symbolic of how completely he had surrendered control over his life, assuming good intentions where evidence deserved investigation. The lesson is not that trust is dangerous, but rather that trust must be accompanied by awareness. Relationships, whether romantic, professional, or familial, cannot thrive when one person carries all the power and the other abandons their ability to question, observe, or think independently. Andrew's journey reminds us that when we give someone absolute control, we risk losing not only our autonomy but also our identity. Another powerful lesson comes from the contrast between appearances and intentions. Victoria embodied the image of a supportive spouse, the kind of partner people admire at charity events and corporate galas. But behind her polished exterior lived ambition twisted into greed. The story warns against assuming that someone's outward behavior reflects their inner truth. Manipulators excel at performance. They speak sweetly, behave gracefully, and often convince others that their actions are rooted in love. But real love does not require domination, secrecy, or control. Real love strengthens, not weakens. Victoria's brand of care was poisoned by hidden motives. She used Andrew's vulnerability to tighten her hold on his life, while convincing the world she was protecting him. The lesson is to look deeper than the surface, to evaluate others by patterns, consistency, and the impact of their choices rather than the elegance of their presentation. A mask can hide cruelty just as easily as it can hide insecurity. Equally important is the lesson of inner strength. Andrew's blindness, his confusion, and the relentless placed upon him could have easily crushed his spirit. Victoria expected him to surrender. The board expected him to disappear quietly. Even the staff began treating him as someone already fading away. And yet, when truth finally confronted him through the voice of a homeless boy, something old and powerful reawakened inside him. His determination, once buried under manipulation and fatigue, resurfaced. The story shows that strength doesn't vanish when our circumstances change. It sometimes goes dormant, waiting for the moment when we choose to reclaim it. Hardship does not destroy character, it reveals it. Andrew's victory was not in regaining sight, but in regaining himself. The lesson is that no matter how deeply someone tries to bury you beneath fear, drugs, or control, your identity remains recoverable as long as you are willing to fight for it. Caleb represents another lesson: the unexpected sources of truth in our lives. He was young, overlooked, and dismissed by society, yet he became the most crucial ally Andrew had. He noticed what adults ignored. He listened when others didn't. He cared when he had every reason not to. The story highlights how insight, wisdom, and courage can come from places we least expect. Sometimes the people who save us are not the ones with titles, wealth, or power, but the ones who are willing to speak when everyone else is afraid to. Caleb's presence reminds us to value voices that exist outside our usual circles. Vulnerability does not erase worth, and youth does not erase insight. The lesson here is to listen, to pay attention to people who live on the margins, to take seriously the observations of those with no agenda. Truth often comes from those who have learned to see the world without privilege shielding their eyes. The story also teaches a difficult but vital lesson about control. If you do not actively participate in your own life, someone else will take over. Andrew's withdrawal into dependence created room for Victoria to rewrite his reality. She decided when he slept, what he ate, which doctor he saw, and even how others perceived him. She shaped his world because he stopped shaping it himself. This dynamic can appear in marriages, friendships, workplaces, or any relationship where complacency replaces agency. The lesson is not to become controlling, but to remain engaged with your own choices. Autonomy is not something others give you. It is something you defend through awareness, boundaries, and involvement. Losing control does not happen overnight. It happens through a series of small surrenders. Andrew's story shows that reclaiming control requires courage, vigilance, and sometimes the willingness to confront painful truths. Finally, the story emphasizes the redemptive power of truth. Lies can hold power temporarily, but truth once exposed can dismantle even the most sophisticated deception. Victoria built an elaborate structure of manipulation, but a single confrontation grounded in evidence destroyed everything she had planned. Truth does not require aggression, it requires clarity and courage. When Andrew entered that boardroom, he did not bring force. He brought facts, witnesses, and the strength to speak. The lesson is that truth, when pursued with determination and presented with integrity, can overcome fear, corruption, and even betrayal. It may take time and it may require sacrifice, but truth is always stronger than the lie that tries to bury it. Together, these lessons form a message that resonates far beyond the story itself. Awareness protects you, courage transforms you, and truth restores you. Andrew's journey shows that even in darkness, literal or emotional, one can find the path back to strength, identity, and freedom. Life will present people who lift us and people who threaten to break us. What matters is how we respond, whom we trust, and whether we choose to reclaim our power when circumstances push us toward defeat. The story reminds us that no matter how lost we feel, rebuilding is possible. And sometimes all it takes to begin that journey is the bravery to see what we never wanted to look at and the determination to rise despite the odds.
If you find this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss upcoming videos. If you have any suggestions or questions, feel free to leave a comment below. I'd really love to hear your feedback. Thank you for watching until the end.